Right, hello, welcome guys to this tutorial video on getting started with GVM. GVM is also known as Greenbone Vulnerability Manager or Vulnerability Scanner, formerly known as OpenVas Vulnerability Scanner. So you might come across previous recordings or documentation that talks about OpenVas. So OpenVas is also the same thing as GVM. GVM is just a new name for the OpenVas Vulnerability Scanner. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to use GVM to scan a vulnerable target. So in our tutorials or in the labs, I've given you a Linux Kong virtual machine. So I've got this running, and also I've got my Kali 2024 virtual machine running. So these are the only two hosts that are powered on my VirtualBox environment. So what we want to do is to log in to the Kali Linux, so using the credentials you've been supplied with. So root and the password is Tor. So we're logging into it. So GVM has already been installed on our Kali VirtualBox machine. So we want to scan this vulnerable target. So this Kong virtual machine is vulnerable, and this is the machine we're going to scan. So in order to scan this machine, what we need to identify is the IP address of this target. I'm going to show you two ways that you can do this. One simple way is if you've got the username and password, you can log in here, do an if config, and identify the IP address or find the IP address of this specific um, target. However, we're going to do this in a different way. So first of all, let's open up a terminal. And here I'm going to run the command if config. So here I've identified the IP address of my Kali machine as 10.0.2.15. Now, one thing you need to make sure is if you have a look at my Kali here and I go to the settings and the network, you can see that my Kali machine is on the NAT network. Also, if I go to my Kong, Linux Kong, and I go to the settings and I go to the network, I can see it's also on the NAT network. Both of these machines have to be on the same network so that they can talk to each other. All right, they have to be on the same local area network so that they can talk to each other. And that's the only way you can be able to scan an IP address that you have access to. So make sure that your settings are correct and that is the case. So going back to our Kali machine, this is the IP address of my Kali. Now I'm going to use a different tool called NetDiscover to identify hosts that are powered on or that are live on my network. So what you want to do is type in the command netdiscover-r, which is for the range, that I'm going to provide the network address, so 10.0.2.0. Now my IP address is .15, but the network address will begin from the .0. So what I'm trying to do here is using NetDiscover to scan all of the hosts that are on this subnet. Does that make sense? So all of the hosts on this subnet is what I'm trying to scan. Then I will use the CIDR/16. The CIDR/16 is telling it to scan the network for any host that begins with 10.0.0, 10.0, and it's going to scan the host part. So I'm using this last two octets. So there's 8 bits here and 8 bits here, and that's why we're using the /16. So we're scanning the last two octets to find out hosts that are here. So I'm going to click on enter. And NetDiscover now would send ARP requests to identify the host. And it says here there are 4 hosts that has been identified. It's still scanning, as you can see, but it's identified straight away a couple of or 4 different IP addresses. So because I've done this many times, I do know that this IP address here is the IP address of the target we're trying, of the Linux Kong machine. And this IP address here is my network address. This IP address here is my default gateway. And this IP address here is the network interface card, I believe, that the VirtualBox installation is using. So this definitely is the IP address of the Kali, of the Kong virtual machine. So how can we confirm this? One way is to do an Nmap scan. So we can do Nmap, and I'll do a -A aggressive scan, -B scan all ports, and I'll give it the IP address 10.0 0.2.16. And Nmap would scan, and one of the things Nmap is going to do is to identify the operating system. And we can use that to second guess the target. We do know that the target we're scanning is an Ubuntu machine, is a Linux distribution. Therefore, Nmap should be able to identify that as part of the scan. So I'm going to let this run in the background. Another way we can confirm this is because we have the credentials to log into this Ubuntu machine. So the username is root and the password is King Kong. This will have been supplied to you as part of the tutorial notes. So I'm going to click on continue and have a look at the IP address just to confirm that we are correct. So accessories, go to terminal, do if config, and straight away we can see the IP address is consistent, ending with .16. So we are right that the IP address that we NetDiscover found is the same thing as the one for this target. So we're going to wait for Nmap scan to finish. But while that is going on, I'm going to start up the vulnerability scanner. So what you want to do is to type in the command GVM start from another terminal. And this should launch the vulnerability scanner on a web page. All right, so it's going to launch this on the web page and we'll be able to access the scanner there. If we go back here, we can see that the results have come back. And one of the things we want to scroll down, we can see that the operating system details is a Linux distribution. So we can confirm that yes, indeed, the IP address that we scanned, let's go back there, actually belongs to a Linux operating system, which by process of elimination, I only have 2 machines running. Therefore, I know this is definitely the Kong virtual machine. So I can see that the GVM window has popped up. I did see it pop up a while ago. So like I said, running the GVM start command -start will start off the Greenbone Vulnerability Services. And you can see it's launched the vulnerability scanner. So you have a window that looks like this on your web browser. And if you just click on sign in, admin and username and passwords have already been populated. So all you have to do is just click on sign in. And then we get into the dashboard. Now remember, from our previous NetDiscover scan, we had the IP address of the Ubuntu machine. So this is the Linux Kong Ubuntu machine. So this is the IP address we're going to be using in our vulnerability scan. So a quick start is to go on to the dashboard here and click on the scan. And here we have a drop down for tasks. So we're going to click on tasks. And on the top left corner here, we have tax wizard or advanced tax wizard. I'm just going to show you what the advanced tax wizard does. So here, if you want to scan a range or multiple host or IP addresses, you can do that. If you want to schedule a scan, let's say you want to scan out of working hours on a specific date and time, you can actually do that using this advanced tax wizard. So that's not what we're doing here. We're just going to go for a normal tax wizard. And here is where we put in the IP address of our target. So 10.0.2.16, the IP address of the Linux Kong. This IP address is going to be different for your own machine. So you have to make sure you've got your environment set up, you identify the IP address of your Linux Kong or the vulnerable target, whichever one you want to scan, identify the IP address using NetDiscover and put it into this box, and then you can click on the scan button, start scan. Now we can see something happens here. It says requested. This status is going to start from 0% and it will progress up until 100%, and the scan will be completed. While the scan is going on, it will be populating this area with the results of the scan. So the vulnerabilities is found, and it's going to categorize them into different severity. So whether it is a high, medium, or low severity. It's also going to identify if there are any known CVEs for specific vulnerabilities is found, and provide us with some more information. So this scan can take 10 minutes, it can take 20 minutes, it can take half an hour, depending on the target you're scanning, depending on the services that are running. As you can see here, it started here at 0%. So I'm going to pause the video and come back when this is probably in about 96% thereabout, and then show you some of the features of the GVM OpenVas vulnerability scanner. So the scan, or the status of the scan, is now at 96%. So I've been running this closely for about 5 to 10 minutes. That's relatively quick. So if you have a look, we can click on the status, and we can see we have the information, the date of the scan, the time. We can have a look at the results, and you can see it's identified a lot of vulnerabilities on this Linux Kong virtual machine. Identified PHP mailer, severity 10.0, Joomla, PHP mailer. A lot of them seems to be related to Joomla. Remote code execution vulnerabilities, RCE, cross-site scripting, open redirect vulnerability. A lot of vulnerabilities actually impact the specific target. So it's categorized them into high, medium vulnerabilities, and low vulnerabilities. If we go to the far right here, we would see that we've got the ports where it's identified the specific vulnerabilities by pointing to the location. So it gives us the IP address, as you can see, as well, of the target. If we go to the CVEs, it's identified different CVEs for this specific target. As you can see, for each vulnerability, I mean. So it's found different ones, a lot of CVEs. The one we're going to be focusing on as part of our exploitation is the GNU bash, which I'll point to you in a moment. So if we go back to the results, we can also filter the results based on low to high or high to low, depending on how you want to view this. So the one, like I said, we're going to be focusing on is going to be the GNU bash environment variable handling, RCE, also known as shell shock. If we click on this, we can see the summary of this vulnerability. It tells us that this GNU bash is prone to remote code execution, vulnerability shell shock. It tells us how it was able to detect that specific vulnerability by going to this URL. It was able to execute this command and get command executed ID on the target. It tells us the detection method, tells us the impact, affected software, the impact. It allows attackers to be able to conduct remote code execution or privilege escalation. It also provides us a solution or a fix that we can update this specific application with a later version 4.3. So you can see here that it's a comprehensive summary of how it found it, the impact, and also the recommendation to solve a specific vulnerability. So if we go back here, we can see it's done. Let's go back to our tasks, and we can confirm that the task has completed, as you can see, done. All right. So you can start the scan again if you want. You can delete a scan, you can edit a scan. So there are action buttons here to do all sort of stuff. Or you can start a new scan. So if I wanted to start a new scan for probably a Windows target or another target, I just have to go to tasks, click on the task wizard again, and the IP address, I'll start all over again if I wanted to do that. So let's go back to our results. So we click on the status, we can see the results. We can see the host. It tells us the host. We can see the operating system of the host is an Ubuntu, which confirms our initial enumeration. The applications that are actually installed and are probably affected, Apache Server, Samba, you can also see some Joomla applications. It tells us the ports that are actually open, which is port 80 and 22, which is where most of the results of the vulnerabilities actually lie. As you can see, if you scroll down here, we can see some affecting port 22 for SSH, where there are some weak algorithms supported for SSH, as you can see here. So OpenVas or GVM, whichever name you prefer to call this vulnerability scanner, is an open source and comprehensive vulnerability scanner that you can use to identify the low-hanging fruits. You can use it to identify vulnerabilities based on CVEs. You can use it to identify vulnerabilities using the pre-installed database that the specific vulnerability scanner uses to identify vulnerabilities on the target. So if we go in here, let's go back to our scan. There are very, have a look at the results. And here it gives us a graphical overview of the vulnerabilities it's found. So it's found 30 high, 26 medium, 29 medium, and 3 low. And some are just logs. If you just want to focus on the high, you can click on the pie chart, and it will show us just the high severity vulnerabilities is found. Like I said, we'll be exploiting this GNU bar shell shock vulnerability when we go into the exploitation phase. We'll look at how can we exploit this to get a reverse shell or remote code execution on the target. So that's what we'll be focusing on in our next class exercise. The final thing I want to show you is you can, so let's go back to our scan. So let's go back to our scan. I'll just take you back straight away to our initial status, the results. And one thing I want us to do again is we can actually download a report. So if you want to download a report that you can submit as part of your vulnerability assessment. So let's say in the real world, you are doing a vulnerability scan on your entire network or on a specific host, and you've used a tool like OpenVas or GVM, which we're using here, you can actually download a report that you can submit as part of your vulnerability assessment. So we're going to click on this arrow button here that says download filter report, and it gives us the option to download the reports of the scan as a PDF, and I'll click on OK. And this should generate a PDF. As you can see, this file is now being saved into my downloads folder, and I do have a scan report. So the date of the scan, the summary of the scan, it gives me the IP address of the target I scanned, the date and time, and it gives me the overview of the results. So host authentications, they define the ports that are actually active, port 80 and port 22. It breaks it down into high, medium, and low. So if you go to the left here, we can see the high vulnerabilities that is found. If we have a read through, it provides us with a summary, how it detected the vulnerability, the impact, and the vulnerability fix as well. So it does this for every single 80 of every single of those 30 high vulnerabilities is found, and also for the medium ones as well. We can have a look at it. So this might be a report that, like I said, you can submit in a real world as part of your vulnerability assessment. So if you're doing an engagement, a penetration testing engagement, you can include this as part of the vulnerabilities that you found that needs to be fixed based on the priority, based on the severity. That needs to be fixed by the people that manage the network or manage a specific system. So that is a nutshell about getting started with the Greenbone Vulnerability Manager, also known as OpenVas. I would encourage you to browse through this tool. There are other things that you might want to get yourself familiar with that I haven't covered here. But basically, this is just one of those very good, this is the main feature on how do I scan for, how do I scan for a specific host to identify vulnerability on the host? How can I generate a report? And then I can start to look at each of those vulnerabilities that are identified and try to figure out which one can I then exploit or which one is exploitable in order to get probably reverse shell, or you might be able to leak some sensitive information, for instance, SQL injection vulnerability, depending on the scenario you've got. So that explains it. And once you're done, what you want to do is to go back to your command line, and you can run another command to stop the service. So if you do GVM -stop, this would stop the vulnerability scanner services, and then you can close up the window and stuff like that. So hope this video was useful, and I should catch up with you guys some other time. Take care.